Samsung have officially unpacked their brand new devices for this year, and the thing is, a lot of what we're getting here seems very familiar to last year's models, but that might actually be a good thing. The Samsung Galaxy S23, the S23 Plus, and the S23 Ultra further what was already a leap from last year, and that's something you're probably going to hear me say a lot in this video. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here we are with the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra in particular, but I do have some thoughts on the lower end models, the S23 and the S23 Plus. Like I said, we're going to focus on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. I mean, it's still going to be the flagship of this entire lineup, and because of that, it's still going to be a big phone. But there's one design aspect that I really enjoy that was introduced in the S23 Ultra this year. Floating camera array right here, and of course, down here, nestled in the left corner, is the S Pen. But one thing that I really enjoy already about this particular phone, the sides are a lot flatter. You still get an edge display, but there's a lot more that you can grip on the sides because it's a bit flatter, and that's where all of the buttons and all of the various bits are. Yeah, those flat sides are going to make the usability a little bit better, and that's really what happens with iterative steps forward for various smartphones. It's really just providing some quality of life changes to a design or to a general aspect of the phone that might already be very familiar. One thing to note about the Galaxy S23 Ultra in particular is that it still has that edge display, but with those flat sides, it does mean that the edge doesn't really bleed all the way over to the sides a whole lot. So maybe you're not going to have any issues with palm rejection or anything like that. There's just more to grip on the sides, which makes it an easier thing to handle. That edge display is 6.8 inches in its size. There's plenty of real estate for everything that you might want to do on this phone from work or play, and of course, the phone will be more than powerful enough to handle pretty much everything you throw at it. That display also provides a 120 Hz refresh rate, which is a feature that is available across all of the different models. The only thing is, on the S23 Ultra, you do have your pick of some resolutions from FHD Plus all the way up to Quad HD Plus. That way you can take advantage of the higher resolution of this particular display. As far as that design is concerned, we also have very nice looking colors from black, white, lavender, all the way to green, and you know that green edition is something that I am going to be gunning for. The other cool thing that you're going to notice is that these colors are available across all of the different models, so no matter which version of the Samsung Galaxy S23 you get, you will be able to have your pick of these particular four colors. And of course, down on the bottom you have the S Pen nestled on the left side, and it's going to be the feature that really differentiates the Ultra from the rest of the lineup. Of course, the S Pen is now a Galaxy S Ultra feature. It's not going to be something we see in any Galaxy Note devices moving forward, but it is again a differentiating factor when it comes to the Ultra of the three. A couple of final details regarding the design. It is an IP68 rated device, so you should be able to take a tumble or even a splash from time to time. And one detail that I thought was pretty interesting is that the phone actually weighs about 8 ounces. 8 ounces, the weight of your typical cup of tea. Well, the tea is done, so here we are with some green ginger tea from Tazo. And on this tea break, I actually want to take a second to just express some gratitude. I know there's a lot of content out there on the new Samsung devices, and I'm just really happy that you came to hang out with me. These tea breaks are also an opportunity for me to get to know all of you, so why don't you let me know how you're doing in the comment sections down below. I'm really grateful that I was able to even get some time with the Samsung devices early on, and then to be a part of Unpacked in general. So I want to make sure to express that and to ask all of you to express some gratitude as well. What's something that you're really grateful for? It's important for us to remember to appreciate the things that we have, whether it's in tech or beyond. So I want to make sure that this community of ours is able to express all of that for a little bit during my tech videos. As I always say in my videos, or rather what I'm going to say moving forward, is that I hope you come for the tech, but you stay for the tea. So enjoy some with me, and I'm grateful for all of you for hanging out with me today. Now, of course, because this is an iterative step forward for the Galaxy S lineup, we're going to be looking at just particular aspects of the phone that might actually be different from last year's model. We already talked a little bit about the design, but let's move over to the cameras because there is a substantial bump up when it comes to these optics. The main camera got the biggest leap. It is now a 200 megapixel shooter. You heard that right, 200 megapixels. And they are going to be binning 16 pixels together, so your final results when it comes to photos are still going to be 12 megapixels unless you actually go all the way up to the 200 megapixel shooting mode. Personally, I might actually try to do that. Maybe I'll travel a little bit with the S23 Ultra, take some really awesome landscape shots, and see what that actually looks like if I were to blow that up to a large print. Stay tuned for that. I'll probably do it in a future video. We do binning all the time on smartphones and whatnot, and last time it was Nona binning for 9 pixels in one to create that ultimately 12 megapixel image, but now there's 200 megapixels on here. And I asked them, what is the term for 16 pixel binning? As it turns out, it's tetra squared binning. Tetra being 4, but then squared because it's 4 times 4, that makes it 16. Tetra squared binning. My, how far we've come. And of course, with such a high megapixel count, you get a few other benefits if you do choose to use them. The S23 Ultra is capable of 8K video, and that's something we've seen before. It is also capable of Super HDR capture at up to 60 frames per second. So if you really want to take advantage of a lot of these features, well, you certainly can in the Ultra, given especially that main sensor. The other sensors that are available on the back include a 12 megapixel ultra wide and dual 10 megapixel zooms that allow you to get 3x and 10x zoom optically respectively. And then you can go beyond that via digital and hybrid zooming at up to 100 times via the space zoom, which of course returns here. The front-facing camera is a 12 megapixel selfie camera, and it does do 4K video recording at up to 60 frames per second, which would make it a good tool to have in your pocket when you want to do things like social media recording or vertical video for social media. And it would be easier because you have the S Pen at your disposal. Yes, the S Pen is able to do all of the pointing and writing and all of the things that you would expect it to do on the screen, but it also acts as a remote so that you are able to move around the camera and trigger recording easily if you have the phone propped up somewhere and you want to get some recording done. This is one of those features that I encourage everybody who has an Ultra smartphone to use more often, especially if they're into a little bit of content creation or they just want to get a group selfie without having to stretch their arm out so much. One other thing that has been added to the camera experience is Expert RAW. Expert RAW is already a mode inside of the camera app itself, but there's also an extra app shortcut, I should say, that gets you straight to the Expert RAW mode. It's here that you have a lot of granular control over the shooting experience, but it also outputs RAW files so that you can throw them into a photo editor like Adobe Lightroom. One thing to note about Expert RAW, however, is that it is still pixel binning no matter what. It tops out at 50 megapixel photos and not the max 200 megapixels that the main sensor provides. I mentioned the S Pen a second ago, so let's talk a little bit about that. This year, there's nothing drastically different. It's still there for all the pointing and writing and doodling that you might do on the screen, and it will be the defining feature of the Ultra that you may or may not use depending on how you actually interact with everything on your device. But personally, I have to admit, I've never really gotten into writing on my Galaxy S Ultra devices a whole lot. I mean, I do 5-minute journals every day, and I do like writing on digital pads and whatnot, but I've never really been able to convert that to a Galaxy S Ultra device for that everyday journaling habit. So that's just my thing. Let me know if you actually do that with your Ultra smartphones in the comments down below. Do you write a lot on those smartphones using the S Pen? Let me know in the comments. And then the last big additions when it comes to the Galaxy S23 Ultra have to do with the internals. Now, the software and the general UI, the general user experience is going to be very familiar, especially if you have worked with Samsung devices up until this point. But now it's just getting that extra bump up that we would expect every single year. And this year it is via the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. This is one of the first phones to actually sport this brand new processor, and it should bring a lot of high-powered experiences easily to everyone that uses this phone. And the thing is, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is available across all of the phones, so you're going to get that boost in power no matter which of these phones you actually choose. Pivoting a little bit on the power front, we also have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is a bump up for the Galaxy S23 Ultra. It also has fast wire charging and wireless charging so that you can keep it topped up pretty easily. And then finally, some connectivity additions like millimeter wave. That's not actually new, but it is nice to see here in case you are able to take advantage of it here in the United States in particular. And then of course, Wi-Fi 6E, which is a standard that you might be able to take advantage of if you happen to have a router that supports that. They actually have an installation here that looks just like the Streets of Seoul, which is really awesome. But overall, I think that this phone right here really does offer a lot. It might not look dramatically different from last year's version, but that's actually a good thing because the leap was last year, and now we have the incremental steps forward to just perfect what was already a great phone from last year. The way that I would really put it is that the Galaxy S23 Ultra is a great smartphone for anybody that's either coming to Samsung or returning to Samsung smartphones after some time away. It's definitely going to be the phone you want to get right now, as it is expectedly the latest and greatest and the best that Samsung has ever put out. But if you're coming from the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, it's not even going to look that different if you are going to upgrade from that to this year's model. That being said, trade-ins are always a thing, so if you are able to save some money by trading in your previous Ultra smartphone, you certainly can do that with the S23 Ultra and get it for a pretty low price. So that is actually a great option, and I have a few resources that you might be interested in the comments, or rather in the description down below, so that you can take a look at trade-in deals and figure out a way to get the latest Ultra smartphone for yourself. But with that, we're going to go ahead and do a quick look at the Samsung Galaxy S23 and the S23 Plus. These particular versions of the Galaxy S lineup are still available in case you want to save a little bit of money, or you don't really need the features that the Ultra are bringing to the table. As you might expect, both of them are smaller, maybe somewhat less capable phones. In the case of the Galaxy S23, you get a 6.1-inch display, and the other main difference is that you have a 3900 mAh battery. In terms of the S23 Plus, you have the 6.6-inch display, and that one comes with a 4700 mAh battery. Now, when it comes to the displays on both of them, they're both actually FHD+. They're full HD+ resolution, so you're not going to get super high resolution, but you still get that 120 Hz refresh rate, which is pretty great, especially for those of you gamers who aren't looking to have like the highest possible specs. Of course, all of the games that are in the Play Store will run just fine on both of these phones because they both have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. The cameras are obviously different as well. Both of the phones will now have a 50 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel wide, there is a 10 megapixel zoom on there, and then you have the same 12 megapixel selfie camera. Generally, when it comes to the lower tiers of the Galaxy S lineups, you want to go to them because they are a little bit more affordable, of course, but also they have certain design aspects that might appeal more to just general users. For example, the fact that the screens are flat, you have flatter sides as well, and of course when it comes to the S23, they're smaller. That way you have better ease of use on the daily, especially for one-handed usage. You have these options still available, and for lower prices, you are able to get into the latest that Samsung has to offer across the general usability without having to break the bank. As of late, I've actually required less from my daily drivers, so everything that the Galaxy S23 Ultra provides is something I can use, but if I just wanted to have a good, reliable phone every single day, that's why the S23 is there. It's a little bit easier on the quality of life aspects, and it is still a phone that is more than powerful enough to handle pretty much anything a typical user would do. Even things like taking photos and doing content capture. It may not have the best sensors compared to the Ultra, but it still has a very capable camera that I'm sure Samsung's processing will still be able to provide some great photos and be able to provide some good videos for stuff like YouTube and stuff like social media. So I think there's plenty to still enjoy on the S23 and the S23 Plus, and I'll make sure to provide some content giving my thoughts on the smaller and the lower tier devices in this particular lineup. And so there you have it, everything on the smartphone side that Samsung announced at this year's Unpacked. I want to know what all of you guys think. While I believe that these are iterative steps forward for the entire lineup, I think that last year's leap was so good already that now we're just adding to it what needs to be added and perfecting the formula that was already started with the Galaxy S22 lineup. But in any case, let me know what you think about the various phones. Which one of these would you actually go for, and what features or what enhancements are you excited for the most? I know the 200 megapixel camera might be really dope. I don't know how often I might actually take 200 megapixel photos, but I'm certainly going to try, and you can look forward to that in a upcoming camera test. Once again, I want to thank all of you for kicking it with me, especially during the tea break where I asked you how you're doing and what you're grateful for. Let me know in the comments. It's been a bit of a heavy travel week for me, but Unpacked has come and gone, so we're going to head back and get started on the Galaxy S23 Ultra in particular. But with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.